There's a kind of silence that doesn't come from weakness, but from having endured enough. I used to be that kind of man. The name always skipped over at gatherings. The older brother never mentioned, unless someone needed the kitchen cleaned or a nail pulled from the wall. I was silent, not because I didn't feel anything, but because I was used to being unimportant. Until one night, during my younger brother's birthday party, amidst the champagne, the warm lights, and the laughter not meant for me, I handed him a white envelope. No one knew it, but that moment changed everything. If you've ever been looked down upon by your own family, if you've ever chosen silence over arguing back and wondered if that made you weak, then this story is for you. Stay with me, because sometimes the very thing you build in silence becomes the loudest voice of your life. I never liked family parties, especially Kyle's birthdays. They always felt more like a performance than a gathering. Loud music, long banquet tables, yellow light reflecting off white walls, and stories nobody really wanted to hear. Everyone trying to talk louder than the next person, laugh louder to prove something. But the only thing I felt was small. This time was no different. Kyle held it on the rooftop of a restaurant downtown. The kind with string lights, crisp white tablecloths, and champagne glasses sparkling under the sunset. Luke wore the blue plaid shirt I bought him during a sale 3 months ago. I wore the same white stand collar shirt, frayed at the cuffs. We walked from the parking garage a few blocks away. I didn't have the confidence to drive my old pickup truck through the valet area. As we stepped into the party space, live music filled the air, a saxophone playing smoothly like a gentle breeze drifting across the wooden floor. I held Luke's hand tighter, as if letting go would make everything slip away from me. Kyle saw us first. He was standing in the middle of a circle of friends, glass in hand, shirt buttoned but collar open wide, hair slicked back neatly. Kyle always knew how to be the center of attention. He raised his glass high, as if about to make a toast, but then paused, glanced at me, and said something that made time slow down. "Well, look who it is." Jacob decided to show up. "Everyone look, the whole family's here." "Oh wait, where's the gift?" The first laugh came from a corner, then spread like wildfire. My mother, Nancy, didn't laugh out loud, but I saw her lips curl up. My father, as always, looked down at his watch, avoiding my eyes. And Luke looked at me. My boy turned, tugged at my sleeve, and asked in a voice small but sharp as a knife, "Is Uncle Kyle serious, Dad?" "We didn't bring a gift." I pressed my lips together, feeling my cheeks burn as if I'd been slapped. Not because of Kyle, not because of the laughter, but because of Luke's eyes. Those innocent eyes had never seen me humiliated like this. I couldn't let him believe his father was someone who didn't know how to give. Even though my whole life, I'd given almost everything I had. I bent down, placed my hand on my son's shoulder, and said very slowly, "Uncle Kyle is just joking, son." But I knew Luke didn't believe me. He was 8, old enough to know the difference between a joke and a jab. I stood up straight, walked towards Kyle. No one stopped me, and hardly anyone paid much attention. Everyone was busy laughing, busy looking at each other, busy continuing the humorous atmosphere they called family fun. I pulled a white envelope from my jacket pocket, handed it to Kyle with one hand. Said nothing, showed no expression, just a gesture. Kyle raised an eyebrow slightly, then shrugged. "Oh, look, he did bring a gift," he announced loudly, making sure everyone heard. "Still plain white paper, no bow, no box." Classic Jacob. Another round of laughter. But this time, something was a little different. Hesitant, Kyle glanced at the envelope as if it wasn't worth opening, then tucked it into his own jacket pocket. I didn't look at anyone else in the room. Not my mother, not my father. I just went back to Luke, took his hand, and said, "Let's find a quiet spot." We stood at the edge of the rooftop terrace, near a row of small trees planted in long stone planters. Luke leaned against the railing, looking down at the street, while I just stayed silent. Inside, I wasn't angry. I just felt empty, like I was used to this already. Used to the feeling of being forgotten, belittled, treated like unnecessary decoration at someone else's party. I heard Kyle's loud laugh again, the clink of bottles against glasses, someone singing a few lines of happy birthday. Everything continued as if nothing had happened. But I knew the real moment hadn't arrived yet. Inside that envelope was something Kyle couldn't imagine. A check. and a letter. Not to buy back affection, not to shock anyone, but to show everyone who I was when I had never truly looked closely. I wasn't retaliating. I wasn't angry. I just chose my moment. And right then, amidst the lazy jazz, the evening sun setting behind glass buildings, and my son squeezing my hand lightly, I knew. They didn't know I wasn't the old Jacob anymore. They just hadn't seen it yet. But they were about to, and this time, I wouldn't need to say much. I let the envelope do it for me. After the party, I took Luke home early. He fell asleep in the back seat just 3 blocks after leaving the parking garage. The night air was cool, the car window cracked open, the smell of asphalt and night breeze drifting in, keeping me painfully awake. I drove slowly, not rushing. I wanted to hold on to that quiet for a little longer. No mocking laughter, no condescending glances. Just me, the steering wheel, and the steady breathing of my son in the back seat. When we got home, I didn't turn on the lights right away. The tiny 2-bedroom apartment belonging to father and son was bathed in the glow from the streetlight outside the window. The pale orange light softened the peeling paint on the walls, making everything look gentler. I sat down on the wooden chair near the kitchen, still holding the keys but didn't put them down. I thought about Kyle's words, and about my mother's eyes when she did nothing. About my father, who hadn't looked at me all evening. They didn't hate me. I knew that, but they didn't truly see me either. And perhaps it had been a very long time since they thought of me as an important part of the family. Ever since my divorce 3 years ago, I seemed to have vanished from their minds. No one asked how I was living or how I felt. At Thanksgiving dinner last year, my mother named each of her grandchildren to congratulate them, praise them, talk about school achievements or wedding photos, but didn't mention Luke. Didn't ask me anything either. Not because she forgot, but because I had nothing to report by her standards. No success, no partner, nothing noteworthy to mention. I was the person everyone knew existed, but nobody really cared about. Like a hallway light bulb. Nice when it's on, unnoticed when it burns out. After the divorce, I got full custody of Luke. She, my ex-wife, left without a clear goodbye, just a note and a few $100s on the kitchen table. I remember sitting up all that night, staring at my son's leftover dinner and thinking, now what? No panic, no shouting. Just an emptiness that stretched from my throat down to my stomach. Empty as if all sound had been vacuumed out of the apartment. I started working extra shifts at night, delivering for an app after working 8 hours as a maintenance technician during the day. Cold winter nights, my hands cracked from the wind, tires slipping slightly on the damp road. But Luke still had a hot dinner and a new coat I saved up for 3 months to buy. He didn't know his dad once ate plain white bread with peanut butter for 2 weeks straight, just to save enough for his class field trip. I didn't tell him. I never told him. I didn't want Luke growing up feeling guilty. I wanted him to grow up knowing he lacked nothing, even when I lacked everything. My family didn't see that. To them, I was the guy whose wife left him, the struggling older brother, the one working 2 jobs and still not getting ahead. Kyle was different. He opened a coffee shop with his girlfriend, then started vlogging, posting online, getting sponsorships. My mother was so proud she talked about it, even at the supermarket. My son is building his own brand, she'd announce loudly to the cashier, as if everyone wanted to know. I wasn't jealous of Kyle. Honestly, he had the right to live his life his way. But what stung was the feeling of being treated like proof of failure just to elevate someone else. I remember overhearing my mother talking about me once. Jacob was always the one who didn't dream big. She didn't know I used to dream. I wanted to open a small wood shop. I loved the smell of fresh wood, the feeling of cutting a board just right, the whine of the saw stopping instantly like a held breath. I thought I'd make a desk for Luke. But then, between electricity bills, school fees, cold medicine, and car repairs, that dream wore down like a dull saw nobody sharpens. But I didn't blame anyone. Not anymore. I learned to live with the silence, with the role of the man no one talks about. I fulfilled my duties, didn't let anyone worry, didn't give anyone reason to remember. Only one person always remembered, Luke. He never asked why I didn't have much money, never demanded theme park trips or new video games. He just liked me telling him stories every night. Stories I made up about a woodworker living in the forest, quietly fixing discarded things and turning them into gifts for the village. One night, Luke looked at me after a story, then said, "Dad, you're like him." I smiled and asked, "You mean the woodworker?" He shook his head. "No, the one who makes everything better." But nobody knows. That sentence repeated in my head every time I felt tired, every time I wanted to quit. And it was also the reason I prepared that envelope, not to be known, but so Luke would know his dad wasn't forgotten, even when the whole world tried to ignore him. I don't know exactly when I started to change. Maybe it was one winter night, returning home after a delivery shift past 11, legs aching, the smell of takeout clinging to my jacket. The apartment was dark except for the small glow from Luke's nightlight. He was still awake, curled up in bed with a half-open book. When I went in to pull the blanket back over his legs, Luke turned over and whispered, "Are you tired, Dad?" I froze, not because of the question, but because of his eyes. The eyes of a child used to seeing his father exhausted, but still hoping for a smile. I sat in the living room for nearly an hour that night, doing nothing, just sitting there in the pale lamplight, looking at my calloused hands. 12 years as a technician, 8 years before that as a construction worker. My whole life I'd used these hands to fix machines, install pipes, patch roofs, grip steering wheels. But never once had I used them to build something for myself. I thought about the wood shop, about the smell of sawdust rising from rough-cut planks. Thought about making a small desk for Luke, then a bookshelf, a picture frame. I didn't know where to start. I had no capital, no workshop, no customers. But I had my hands and an old phone. So I began. It started with evenings spent sketching clumsily at the kitchen table, scrap paper filled with rough designs. I began collecting wood scraps from old construction sites, borrowing a friend's storage space to make a few test pieces. Whenever Luke went to sleep, I'd open my laptop, the old one from my apprenticeship days, battery nearly dead, and research how to sell on Etsy, how to photograph products, how to price them. Everything was new, and everything was hard. There were nights I scrounged for loose change to buy wood oil. Times I had to choose between buying new materials or paying the internet bill. I once packed orders in empty pizza boxes cut down to size. My shop name was Still Wood, meaning both it's still wood and I'm still here. Maybe I named it that because I needed to remind myself, no matter what, I was still here. The first month, I sold 3 items: a pine candle holder, a picture frame, and a pen box. All 3 orders were from strangers. No friends, no family. No one knew I was doing this. And I liked it that way. I wrote thank you notes by hand for each customer. Affixed stamps with glue bought at the dollar store. Every time I got good feedback, I took a screenshot and saved it in a folder named Proof. But I didn't plan on sending it to anyone. Just saving it for the days I felt inadequate. Some months after costs, I only made $20 profit. I once stared at the sales screen for 3 hours, wondering if I was fooling myself, if I should stop. But then Luke ran into the room with a wooden ruler I'd just ruined, holding it up like a treasure and saying, "Dad made this, right? I'm going to show it off at school." That was it. And I knew I couldn't stop yet. About 6 months later, I started making videos. Simply propping my phone on a stack of books, filming myself sawing, sanding, assembling. I didn't talk in the videos, just worked quietly, the soft rasp of the saw, the swish of sandpaper across wood, lights slanting through the window like golden dust motes. I edited the videos, added calm background music, and posted them on TikTok. I didn't expect much, but one video of me making a small coffee table from reclaimed wood suddenly went viral. A week later, my account had over 40,000 followers. Order messages flooded in. I couldn't believe my eyes. I stayed up for 2 nights straight replying to messages, confirming orders, calculating shipping costs. And amidst the panic, one message made me pause. It was from someone named Chelsea, an independent investor specializing in supporting small businesses started by men after divorce. She wrote, "I see something very real in how you do things. Not rushed, not flashy, but with depth. I'd like to invest to help you scale your shop." 3 weeks later, I signed a first investment contract in my life. $40,000 in seed funding. Not life-changing money instantly, but enough for me to breathe. Enough to pay off the truck loan. Buy Luke a new bed. and for the first time in years, be able to turn down a midnight delivery shift. I didn't tell anyone in the family. No Facebook updates, no photos sent, no text to my mom. Not because I wanted to hide it, but because I no longer needed to prove anything. I just wanted to do it for me, for Luke, for the man once considered invisible, now slowly becoming himself. I didn't know if I'd become a huge success or just make a living. But for the first time, I felt like I was building something, not just surviving. And for the first time, I knew I wasn't just passing through this life. I was carving my name onto it. Each cut, each speck of sawdust falling on the floor was part of my story, and I was about to let them see it. But not with words, with a white envelope. I remember the afternoon before Kyle's birthday party. A light rain was falling. Luke was coloring on the floor while I was busy checking a newly finished wood order. In the living room, the ceiling fan turned slowly, making a steady creaking sound, a kind of silence typical of small homes, where there aren't many voices but a sound that seeps deep into your chest. Just then, Luke suddenly looked up and asked, "Dad, is Uncle Kyle better than you?" I put down my pencil and looked at him. Not annoyed, not hurt, just choked up. He wasn't asking to compare. He was just asking like a child starting to realize there are metrics in this life adults use to categorize each other. He was starting to hear the veiled comments, the praises like Kyle is really successful, or if only Jacob had a bit of his brother's fire. I asked back, "Why do you think that, son?" Luke shrugged, continuing to color as he spoke. "Because everyone talks about Uncle Kyle. Grandma's Facebook is full of his pictures. Last year's party was the same. But Dad, nobody mentions you." He wasn't trying to make me sad. He was just right. I didn't answer right away. I went into the bedroom, opened the dresser drawer. Inside was the white envelope. I kept it there for 3 weeks, like a silent promise to myself. Every time I saw it, I reminded myself, not for revenge, but to tell the story right. The story they never asked. The story they would never know because they didn't care. That envelope wasn't for Kyle. It wasn't to cause a scene at the party either. It was so Luke could see his dad wasn't someone pushed aside. It was for me, for the first time, to dare walk into the room and not ask permission to exist. I sat down next to Luke, still holding the envelope, and said softly, "Dad's going to the party. But this time, it's not to show anyone what Dad is. It's to show you you don't have an ordinary father." Luke didn't reply. He just placed his hand on mine, then went back to coloring. That was it. But it was enough. That morning, I woke up earlier than usual. Something kept me from sleeping longer. The sky was clear blue, sunlight filtering through the blinds. I opened the closet, took out the clothes I'd prepared the day before. A light gray shirt, collar carefully ironed, black khaki pants, not new but still neat. I didn't own a tie. Didn't need one. I shaved more carefully than usual, put on a little cologne, cheap but lightly scented. The smell reminded me of my first job interview after the divorce. The smell of a man trying to start over, even if no one knew how hard he was trying. Luke wore the polo shirt I'd just bought him for his birthday. He ran out showing it off with childish excitement. "Do I look okay, Dad?" I nodded. "You always look okay." I took the envelope, slipped it into my inner jacket pocket. No bow, no note, just a check and a letter. I checked it one last time, then closed and locked the door. Stepping out to the truck, I took a deep breath. We arrived a little early. The rooftop restaurant was on the 15th floor, the glass elevator gliding up between levels like floating through invisible space. As the doors opened, I felt the cool air conditioning mixed with the scent of white wine and white lilies arranged along the walkway. The room was already crowded. The low murmur of conversation sounded like waves inside a glass bottle. I walked in, still holding Luke's small hand tightly. Eyes turned, some surprised, some indifferent. No one ran over to hug me. That was fine. I didn't need it. Kyle stood in the center, as always, surrounded by friends, colleagues, and handshakes that screamed, "I know you're successful." He wore a navy blue suit, red tie, smiling broadly. When he saw me, Kyle waved like a stage actor spotting an unexpected audience member. "Jacob, you made it?" "Wow." Then, without waiting for my reply, he turned to his friends. "The whole family's here." Even Jacob showed up. Must be something special today. A light ripple of laughter. Not overtly malicious, but nothing you could call kind either. I just smiled, walked forward, and took the envelope from my jacket, handed it to Kyle, gently, without fanfare. "Happy birthday," I said. Kyle took it, raised an eyebrow, then slipped it into his pocket without looking. I didn't blame him. He probably thought I was just trying to make a small gesture like unsuccessful people often do when they show up at places like this. I said nothing more. Luke and I retreated to a quiet corner near the balcony. Yellow string lights hung overhead, and lazy jazz flowed through the air like warm wine. I got Luke a glass of water and held a soda with ice for myself. I didn't drink alcohol. I didn't want my head fuzzy when things were about to happen. I sat there, observing, like a craftsman waiting for glue to dry. Not rushed, not tense. I hadn't come to draw attention. I came to end the wrong story others had written about me. I looked at Luke. He leaned against my arm, eyes bright, smiling slightly as he watched the hanging lights reflect in his water glass. I knew the moment was approaching. Nothing more to do. I was prepared. My part was done. And this time, I hadn't come to endure more disrespect. I came to say, with an envelope, that I had lived a life of value. And the man the whole family had ignored for 10 years was never redundant. Around 8 o'clock, Kyle stepped onto the small wooden platform at the end of the room. Under the soft yellow spotlight, he raised his wine glass as if accepting an award. Kyle's voice rang out, smooth, familiar, as if practiced in front of a mirror many times. "I want to thank everyone for coming tonight. Wonderful friends, valued colleagues, and especially my parents, who have always believed in me unconditionally." The room erupted in applause. My mother stood near the buffet table, her eyes glistening as if witnessing a historic moment. My father smiled slightly, raising his glass in silence. Kyle bowed humbly, then continued, "I just want to say today, I feel truly fortunate, and perhaps a little more grown up." Someone shouted from a corner table, "Open the gifts, Kyle." And immediately, applause broke out again as if they'd been waiting for this moment all evening. Kyle laughed, nodded, and approached the table piled high with luxurious gift boxes. Metallic wrapping paper, red ribbons, logos of expensive brands. He opened each one artfully, unhurriedly, like filming an unboxing video for Instagram. High-end cologne, a custom-tailored shirt, a bottle of rare liquor, a gift card to a high-end spa. Each unwrapping brought murmurs of admiration, pats on the back, and laughter. Everyone seemed caught up in the rhythm. Then Kyle picked up a white envelope. I knew it was the one I gave him. I saw his hand pause for half a second, but then he held it up, waving it towards the crowd as if holding an electricity bill. "Oh, this one looks very modest." He chuckled. "From my older brother, Jacob. Let's give him a round of applause, everyone." A few people laughed along, a few clapped politely. I watched Kyle from my seat near the railing. Luke was leaning against me, eyes curious. He didn't understand what was happening, but I knew it was about to. Kyle tore open the envelope. Casually, unsuspectingly, he pulled out the check first. Kyle's eyes fell on the bold number. His hand froze. His mouth was still smiling, a half-finished smile. His eyebrows furrowed slightly, his gaze darting downwards. He unfolded the other paper, the letter. The atmosphere in the room began to shift, very subtly, almost imperceptible at first. But I saw it. Kyle didn't read it aloud, didn't comment. He just stood there, motionless, his hands holding the letter, and check as if holding something fragile. People looked at him, then at each other. A woman standing nearby whispered, "What's wrong?" The clink of a glass sounded isolated. A waiter behind him stopped mid-step. The music seemed to quiet down, or perhaps that was just the feeling. The room paused. Kyle took a step back, then another. Then he sat down next to the gift table, not collapsing, but more like his legs couldn't hold him anymore. His hand trembled. Not much, but enough to see from a distance. The check silently slipped onto his lap. No one knew what was in the envelope, but everyone knew something had happened. The room was so quiet I could hear Luke's breathing beside me. I looked down at my son. He looked up at me, eyes full of questions. But then, very quickly, his expression changed. He didn't ask, "What's wrong, Dad?" like I thought he would. Instead, he whispered, "You did that, didn't you?" I nodded, slowly, without a word. Luke gave a small nod, as if he understood. I looked back at Kyle. He was looking at the letter a second time, his lips moving as if rereading it in his head. Then he looked around the room. His eyes no longer held the gaze of the center of attention, but the look of someone who had just lost his place in a role he knew by heart. He looked up, saw me. I stood there. Didn't approach. Didn't speak. Didn't smile. Didn't gloat either. I stood like an ordinary person amidst the small chaos I had created with quiet clarity. Kyle opened his mouth for the first time in the 2 minutes of silence that felt like an eternity. "You gave me this? Really?" I replied, my voice calm. "Really?" He looked down again. $25,000. From you. His voice cracked small. "You believe in me?" I didn't answer. I just watched. Someone whispered, "What's in it?" And Kyle answered, still choked up, "It's an opportunity. For the dream I talked about. To start the fashion brand I always mention." Then, in the still silent room, he said the thing I least expected. "He believes I deserve it." A ripple of murmurs. Soft. Not loud. Just uncertainty about how to process the emotion. My mother slowly walked towards me, her eyes bewildered. "Jacob," she called softly, "what is this?" I looked at her. "It's something you never thought I could do." She said nothing more. I turned to Luke. He was looking at me as if seeing someone else. Not the tired dad, not the man working 2 jobs, but someone with a voice, even without ever speaking loudly. Kyle still sat there, clutching the envelope. Didn't get up. No longer the center. But I knew he was beginning to understand. And for the first time in my life, the whole room looked at me. Not as Jacob the older brother or Jacob the technician, but as Jacob, the person who could change the atmosphere in the room with just one quiet action. No shouting needed, no stage needed, just the truth and the courage to give it. I bent down and asked Luke, "Ready to go home?" He nodded. I took his hand, walked past the banquet tables, past the gazes, the whispers, the unnamed silences. Behind me, I heard someone softly say, "That's the coolest thing I've ever seen." I didn't turn back. I didn't need to. I just squeezed Luke's hand, stepped into the elevator, and as the doors closed, I knew I had stepped out of my own shadow and left the light for others to see. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. No alarm. No garbage trucks clattering down the street. Just an unusual quiet spreading through the small apartment, as if everything outside had paused to let me breathe. I sat up, feet bare on the coldwood floor. Morning light filtered through the blinds, illuminating the wooden chair in the corner where I often sat reading documents late at night after Luke was asleep. Everything felt normal, except for one thing. No texts, no calls, not a word from Mom, no comments in the family group chat. The phone screen remained dark, as if someone had cut the signal. And the strange thing was, I didn't feel scared. On the contrary, I felt relieved, as if for the first time in years, I wasn't on the defensive. Not waiting for criticism disguised as advice. Not pretending to smile when someone talked about Kyle with that proud, comparative tone. I made breakfast, slowly, without overthinking. Just scrambled eggs, fried sausage, poured milk into a glass. Luke woke up, hair tousled, eyes still sleepy, but when he saw the plate, he laughed. "Dad playing master chef this morning?" I smiled. Today we eat like successful people. We ate in the small kitchen, sunlight pouring onto the table like liquid honey. The clink of forks on ceramic plates, Luke chattering about school, and his soft laugh when he asked, "Dad, how many times do you think Uncle Kyle read the letter?" I didn't know. I didn't need to know. Around noon, my phone screen lit up. A simple text. From Kyle. "Can you meet for a bit?" I stared at the words for a long time. Not because I was worried, but because this was the first time Kyle had reached out proactively. Not to show off, not to tease, but to talk. I let the message sit for almost 3 hours. Then I replied, "Tonight." Coffee shop next to the old bookstore. The shop was small, quiet, tucked beside a worn-out bookstore with a slightly crooked sign. I arrived first, ordered a black coffee, and chose a table on the balcony, where there were a few pots of purple flowers and a light breeze drifting through the railing slats. Kyle arrived later, dressed casually, no tie, not flashy like usual. He sat down across from me, his gaze searching, but the smugness was gone. Nothing that could be called embarrassment either. Just someone trying to figure out how to start over. "You know," Kyle said after a few seconds of silence, "I read your letter 3 times. At first, I thought it was some kind of joke. Then I saw my name in every line. the disappointment, the things I never dared to face. I said nothing, just listened. Sitting there, Kyle continued. I remembered when we were kids. You were the first one to teach me how to tighten a screw. Cut wood. I used to think you'd be the first one in the family to succeed. But then you chose a different path. Silence. The kind of silence that sometimes people can't stand to hear. I looked at him. And you thought I chose silence because I failed? Kyle leaned back in his chair, nodded slightly. I thought so. But now, I'm not so sure. I think maybe you were silent because you were doing something real. Without needing an audience, a breeze drifted past, carrying the scent of coffee and old books from across the street. I tightened my hand slightly around the coffee mug, then said, I didn't give you that check so you'd know what I was doing. I gave it because I heard you talk about that fashion dream for years without doing anything. I saw you tired after realizing the world wasn't handing you opportunities. I didn't want you to give up like Dad used to give up on everything. Kyle didn't reply, but I saw his eyes soften, and I added, I didn't give it to get credit or to teach you a lesson. I gave it to end that cycle. The competition, the toxic silence between us. Kyle lowered his head. His voice dropped. I'm sorry. I shook my head. I don't need you to be sorry. I just need you to understand. Family isn't a place to win. It's a place to see each other accurately. We sat there, saying nothing more for a few minutes, just letting the silence do the rest of the work. The air wasn't tense, nor overly emotional, just real. Before standing up, Kyle took a small card from his pocket. I wasn't sure if I should give this to you or Luke, but I think I should start somewhere small. I took it, nodded. As he walked away, I saw his back no longer carry the posture of someone constantly needing validation. Something lighter, a little set back, and maybe, for the first time, more genuine. I stayed for a while, watching people pass by on the street below. A middle-aged man walking his daughter across the road. A student carrying a stack of old books. An elderly woman who had just bought lavender. No one knew what had just transpired at this small wooden table near the railing. I didn't need to know, because sometimes forgiveness doesn't need to be declared. It just needs permission to arrive. That evening, my mother tagged me in a post for the first time in years. A photo of me packing orders in the workshop. Caption, proud of my son, Jacob, dedicated woodworker. Not a word of explanation for why she'd never mentioned me before. But I didn't need one either. A few hours later, Dad called. Not a text, not avoidance, a real phone call. His voice was a bit hoarse, uncertain. Son, I know I should have said this long ago, but that day, when you gave the envelope, you seemed different. You seemed like the man I should have taught you to be, but you learned it yourself. I didn't answer right away. Some apologies don't need acceptance. They just need to be spoken, so two people can start again. I told Dad I understand, and I'm not holding on to anything. That night, I went to bed early, and for the first time in many, many years, I had a dream where I wasn't being pushed aside or having to prove anything. Just me, standing in my workshop, sun streaming through the window, and Luke's laughter echoing from somewhere outside. A few days after meeting Kyle, I found a small package left at my door. No label, no signature, just a smooth wooden box, palm-sized, accompanied by a simple handwritten note for the brother who didn't give up. I opened it. Inside was a wooden hammer, not a working tool, but a miniature version intricately carved. The handle was engraved with the words, "Still here." I gently traced the lines, then sat silently for minutes, thinking nothing, just breathing. I didn't know where Kyle had gotten the hammer made, or who he asked, but I knew. It was his way of apologizing. No words needed, no explanation, just an action. And sometimes, an action is worth more than 1,000 words. I placed the hammer on the shelf near my workbench, among wood samples, polishing oil jars, and drawings Luke had hung up with paper clips. Not for decoration, but as a reminder that some battles don't need winners, just perseverance. The following week passed like any other. I packed orders, delivered a few items to local customers, still worked my day job, and typed on the computer at night. But something felt different, not because I was famous, not because I was rich, but because I no longer felt I had to shrink myself to fit someone else's expectations. My mother started sending me articles about craft fairs, telling me I should try applying. Dad sent me links about durable woods suitable for outdoor products. No one brought up the envelope again, nor acted awkward about what had happened. And I felt light, not because they had changed, but because I no longer needed them to change for me to live. One afternoon, Luke came home from school and placed a handmade card on the table. The edges were unevenly cut, crayon colors slightly smudged, but in the center was a drawing of a man wearing an apron, holding a sign that read "Number 1 Dad." On the sign was a huge check, twice the size of the man in the picture, and on his back was a red cape drawn with markers. I looked at that card for a long time. No victory was greater than that. No amount of money, no contract, no recognition from the outside world could touch my heart the way Luke's gaze did. I hugged him, and when he asked, "Dad, does my drawing look like you?" I just said, "It does. Even better than you think." That night, sitting alone in the small workshop where I worked every evening, I took out the letter I had written Kyle. I reread it, not to check it, but to make sure I had said everything in my heart. Every line in it, every sentence, every period were words I once wanted to scream during family dinners, during gatherings where I was only asked, "Is work still okay?" as a social nicety. No need to scream anymore. I let it go, and it had reached where it needed to reach. That night, I turned off the lights earlier than usual. No screen glow, no sound of saws or smell of burning wood. Just the wind whispering past the window and Luke's steady breathing in the next room. I lay in the dark, eyes open, but thinking nothing. No calculating, no bracing myself, no pretending to be strong. I just lay there, and for the first time in a very long time, felt enough. Not good enough for others, but enough for myself. A month later, Kyle started his own channel, sharing the design process for his debut collection. He didn't mention me in any videos. I didn't expect him to, but in one short clip, I saw a small hammer placed on his workbench, exactly like the one I received, identical down to the detail. I smiled, the kind of smile no one needs to see. We didn't become best friends, didn't see each other often, but whenever we met, something had changed. A direct gaze, an unguarded nod, a recognition that didn't require apologies. My family still had its noise, its favoritism, its moments that tired me. But I no longer felt trapped there. I stepped out but didn't cut ties. I returned but didn't shrink myself. I just chose to live true to my own size. And in this noisy world where everyone is trying to be seen, heard, validated, the greatest freedom sometimes is needing nothing from them anymore. No apologies needed, no proof needed, just being yourself. And that was the kind of freedom I once thought I could never have. I never thought a white envelope could silence an entire room. But it wasn't the check or the letter inside that stunned everyone. It was the fact that I dared to stand up, not to shout, not to criticize, but to show them the real me. A man once overlooked, but who never gave up. That envelope didn't just change how they saw me. It changed how I saw myself. I no longer lived to please others, chasing validation from people who never asked how I was really doing. I lived to be a good father, a skilled craftsman, a decent human being, even when no one is applauding. And the strange thing is, when I stopped needing recognition, it started to find me. If you're in a place where your voice is dismissed, if you've lived quietly for too long, I just want to say, don't shrink yourself to fit someone else's narrow view. You don't have to shout. Just stand firm. And when the time is right, you'll see. Silence is also a powerful language. If this story touched you, please leave a comment and share it with others who have felt underestimated. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this, because sometimes what we give in silence is the most powerful thing we receive back for ourselves.